Hi everyone, it's Lindy on here from Pink Whisper Designs. Today we're going to be making this 3D cathedral window ornament, and we're going to be using lots of products from Tim Holtz today. So let's go ahead and get started. We're going to be using this Sizzix Bigs die. This is the cathedral window, and this is a steel rule die, so you can see that it's really thick there. So to run this through the machine, I'm using my Spellbinders Platinum 6 die cutting machine, and I've got one cutting plate, then the steel rule die. I've got 3 pieces of cardstock because these dies will cut through several pieces of cardstock at one time. And then I've put my other cutting plate on top, and I'm going to go ahead and run that through. So again, depending on the thickness of your paper, you can run several pieces through. So I've got these 3 beautiful cathedral windows. And now, using my antique linen distress oxide ink, I'm going to just put a nice layer of this all over the top here. We're going to be adding a lot more texture to this here in a second. So now I'm going to take my ground espresso distress oxide ink, and we're going to be going around the edges and kind of on the insides of those window panes a little bit as well, just to add a few little shadows here. And again, we'll be adding some more texture to this. I wanted to give it kind of an aged look, but just sort of an elegant aged look to it. So I'm going to add this, and again here I'm just kind of tucking some of that ink right in between here. And you don't want to be even or perfect, just kind of randomly tucking that in. And now I'm going to use the Distress Mica spray, and I'm using that tarnished brass one. You do want to shake that up really well before you use it, and then I'm going to spritz that all over this window. And that's going to give us a beautiful shimmer, a metallic-y effect to this window. And you can see that there. It's just gorgeous. So now with some clear acetate, I'll back this window. I'm using my Nuvo Deluxe adhesive to put that together. And I'll just line that up. I'll cut this after it dries. So I do want to pat that down. And then I'm just going to place something heavy on top of that and let that dry. Once that's dry, I can go ahead and cut away that excess. And you can see that there. So now let's take the second window that we die cut and go ahead and attach these two together. That'll just sandwich that acetate right in between these 2 layers. And then it'll also give a little more stability to the window. And again, I'll let that dry. Now I've got that ground espresso, and I'm going to go all the way around the edges, just taking away that white edge. So for paper, I'm using this Backdrops paper pack. This is volume number 1, and you get all these beautiful patterns in here. And this is from the Tim Holtz collection. We're going to be using this one on top. And then to coordinate with that for the back of our ornament, I'm going to be using this Cardstock, and this is the cool colors. We're going to be using one of those greens here as well. So I want to trace out my cathedral window really quickly here on both pieces of cardstock. And then I went ahead and cut those out. So that green one is going to be for the back of the ornament, and the patterned one will be for the inside of the ornament. So I've got some Nuvo Deluxe adhesive. I'll go ahead and attach these 2 together. I'm using my We Are Memory Keepers bone folder just to press that out. And now going back to that ground espresso, I'm going to go ahead and edge this just like we did before. So I'm going to go around all the sides here. And I'll do that on the back side of this as well. Now I've got my cathedral window lined up with the back portion of our ornament, and I'm going to go ahead and punch a hole. I'm using my Fiskars hole punch. This is the 1/8 inch hole punch, and I'm just going to punch that now while I'm thinking of it so that I have a hole that goes all the way through there. So now with my Sizzix Thinlits from Tim Holtz, I'm going to grab this die set that's called Fireside. Now for the fireplace itself, I want to die cut that out of this wood grain pattern. This is the Distress Wood Grain Cardstock, and I'll show you that up close. It's really gorgeous. And I'm just deciding which direction I want that wood grain to go. And now for the rest of the pieces, I'm going to be using the Strathmore Bristol Smooth 100-pound cardstock. So I did die cut a second fireplace because I didn't want the inside to be wood grain, so I die cut it out of some Strathmore Bristol Smooth cardstock. So we'll just set that wood grain piece aside. Now going back to the antique linen, I'm just going to add a little shadow to the edges of my fireplace here just by coming in from the side, using my foam applicator tool and just brushing in a little bit of that ink, leaving the middle part white, and then adding a little shadow on the inside of the fireplace here. Back to the ground espresso, I'm going to color in some of the wood grain sections of the fireplace, some of the wood trim, and I'll just leave those right in the paper that I die cut. Just makes it easier to color these in. I'm just going to leave those in there and then we'll pop those out in a second. Then I'll just quickly color in the rest of these pieces. For the grate on the fireplace with the little wrought iron piece, I'm going to the black soot. And then I'll add some of that to the inside section of the fireplace as well. Now, using these two colors here, which are the Squeezed Lemonade and the Crackling Campfire, I'll go ahead and color in the fire for the fireplace. And I'm kind of patting on the color here because these are fairly delicate, so I'm just kind of patting that on, and then I'll go back to that lighter shade and just blend that out a little bit. So next I'm going to grab the Barn Door Distress Oxide ink pad, and we'll use that to color in these little stockings. And those little white oval pieces, those are for the top of the stocking. Those are like the little white fur at the top of the stocking. So I'm not going to be coloring those in. And then I'm grabbing the aged mahogany to add a little shadow to these. And then I'll use that same color to color in that little bow up above there. So now I'm using some sparkle glitter. This is from the Distress collection again. And you get two different glitters in here. You get the tinsel and the garland. And we're going to be using the garland today, which is kind of a tarnished brass, maybe goldy kind of color. And you can see how pretty that is there. And I'll be using my Nuvo glue pen. And I've got that garland that we die cut earlier. And I'm just going to add glue all over the top of this. And then we'll sprinkle on some of that beautiful glitter. And that'll add a little sparkle to the inside of our little scene here. So now let's go back to that fireplace, and you can see that it's a little too large for our scene. So I'm going to cut that bottom off, and you can just follow those score lines right along the bottom, just cutting that away. And that little piece was to cover that bottom area, so we won't be needing that. So I'm just kind of checking to see how that's going to line up at the bottom of the ornament here. And then I'll go ahead and glue this in place. And then we can cut away the excess here in a second. So I'm just going to glue that down, just bringing it up just a little bit so it doesn't get in the way of the bottom edge there. And then I'll just trim away any excess here. Again, I don't want that cardstock to get in the way of the tape that we're going to be putting around the edges. So I'm coming in about 1/8 of an inch there with my cutting. Now I can go ahead and assemble my little fireplace here. And this is really cute. This would be adorable on a little card. And you could certainly color it in with your colored pencils or your Copic markers. But I just found it pretty simple and quick to do this with my ink pads. I do like to make several ornaments. I like to make them as gifts for Christmas. So I like to keep the process fairly simple when I can. And if you're not sure how to assemble this, just sometimes I'll put that packaging right alongside it. I think I have it off to the side there. And I just follow along where everything needs to get attached. Now I'm just checking to see where I want that pretty sparkly garland to be. And I'll just put a little dot of glue there so I know where I want to position this. And now I can cut away that excess. Again, cutting in a little bit so it's not in the way of my tape. I'll put that bow down and hang my little stockings as well. And you can see how cute this would be just on its own. I just think this is adorable. And those are the little tops of the stockings that I'm putting on there, just the little furry part at the top of the stockings. Now I'm going to grab that tree and that present and the wreath as well. And these are from the Sizzix Thinlits Festive Things die set. And I use this a lot. This is one of my favorite die sets. Now I'll use Rustic Wilderness and Mowed Lawn to color in all of these little pieces here. I'll just cut the bottom off of that tree. We're not going to be needing that. That won't show. And then I'm just blending these out a little bit more. And then I'll go back to the barn door Distress Oxide and add that to the bow for the wreath and to this little package. And here I'm trying to keep things a little bit muted. I don't want too many bright colors. I want to keep it more on the antique-y side. And then I'll add that bow to the wreath and I'll add the ribbon to the present here. So let's grab some jewels from the Pink Fresh Studios Essential Jewels Mix. And I'm going to add some to that little tree and one to the bow on that wreath. Just putting some dots of glue, and I'm going to go ahead and use these white, kind of crystally white ones. So now I've got my Doris 1/8 inch foam strips. These are double-sided foam strips. And I'll remove the backing from the tape here, and I'll run this all the way around the sides of this ornament. Now I can go ahead and tuck that tree right into place, and don't worry that it's going to sit on top of that tape, because we're going to be adding a second layer of that foam tape here as well. So I'm just going to line that right up along the edge here in front of the fireplace, and then I'll add that present the same way. Now anything that's going to possibly hang over the edges, I'm going to trim that away. So you can see that's all set. Now I'll add my second layer of that foam tape all the way around. So once I have that done, you can see there we've got that double thickness. We're going to be covering that up later on, so don't worry if it looks a little bit messy there. I have a way a little tip for fixing that. So I've removed the backing and I can go ahead and attach the front panel. And I like to use my Nuvo Surface Sweep brush just to brush away any dust or any excess glitter or anything. It's a super soft brush, so it won't scratch the acetate or anything. Now I'm just taking a little time to line that up, and I'll press that down. Now you could certainly make a little shaker card out of this as well. So it'd be fun if you wanted to add some snow, like a snowy effect in there, or some little gems, but I decided not to. I just wanted it to be like a little window that you were looking into this cute little scene. I'm going back to those foam strips and adding it right around my wreath there, and you can see how easily I can go around that little wreath with that tape. Now I'm going to add some texture paste, and this texture paste that we're using has a matte finish to it. So I'll use this spatula that has kind of a pointy tip on it because I want to get into the little frames on the window here. And I'm going to add that snowy effect, and I'll even add some up top here too, anywhere where these little openings are for the windows. So I let that dry, and now I've got this cute little icicle. This again is from the Tim Holtz collection, and it is called Icicles. And I will list and link all of the products I've used today down below and also on my blog. And here I'm adding a little bit of the Ranger Multi-Medium Matte Glue, and this will dry crystal clear, and it's a super strong adhesive, so it'll hold that on nicely. Going back to the texture paste, and I'm going to fill in on the top of those icicles again with that snowy effect. And then we will need to let this sit and dry. Now to hang this ornament, we're going to be using some beautiful velvet ribbon, and I'll grab this beautiful red color here. Just going to cut a little strip of this. And this is from the Velvet Trims. This is the Warm collection. And it does have some coordinating papers as well. Just like we used earlier with the cool colors, these are the warm colors, and they do coordinate somewhat with those ribbons. So now I've got that ribbon, and I've got a bead here that has a nice big opening on it. I want something large enough so I can fit that velvet ribbon through there. And then I've got this bell. These are from the Tiny Bells collection. And that'll just add a little bit more interest, and it sounds really pretty as well. So now I'm going to go ahead and feed that ribbon right through this opening up at the top. I'm using my pick tool to feed that through, and then I'll just grab it with my tweezers from the other side. Once you have that done, you can go ahead and trim those on an angle and then feed that little bead through there. And again, I'm just sliding it through and then using my tweezers to pull it through the other side. And you can use your pick tool if you need to, just to push that through a little bit, just to get it started. And then again, grab it from the other side with your tweezers. So once you have that on, you can go ahead and tie a knot at the top of the ribbon. And then just trim away any excess. Now I've got some baker's twine and I'm going to tie that little bell on with the baker's twine. So once we have that all set, we can go ahead and add a sentiment. I'm using my quote chips. These are the red with white lettering. You get all these different ones in this collection. This is from the Christmas Noel set. Now I've had these for a few years, so I'll try to list them down below, or I'll list something similar. Now I'm using my Dewdrop Brilliance ink pad. This is a pigment ink in the Galaxy Gold. And then I'm using my Ranger Gold embossing powder. And I'm just applying that ink all around the edges of this quote chip. And then I'll just add some embossing powder, tap off the excess, and then I'll go ahead and heat set that. And that's going to give us a nice kind of an antique-y gold finish around the edges. You'll see that here in a second. And we're going to add a few layers of this embossing. I'm just making sure I don't have any right on the front, so I'm just brushing away any excess embossing powder. You could certainly use your anti-static powder tool here before you do this as well. And this is a nice way to finish off these little quote chips. So now I'm going to do that same process again, just patting that ink on all the way around. And I'll dip it back into the embossing powder here. And then I'll go ahead and heat set that again. And that'll give us a nice thick layer of embossing powder all the way around. And you can do this as many times as you want to. If you want to get it really thick, do it 3 or 4 times. Now I can go back to that Ranger multi-medium matte glue and glue this on. And you do want to put plenty of that on there just to make sure that it holds tightly to this texture paste that we have down at the bottom here. Now I'm going to add a little mirrored heart, and I colored that in with my alcohol marker. So just pick your marker color, and the alcohol ink will dry permanently on these little embellishments. You can use these on your gems, any of your gems as well. Once it dries permanently, but don't use a watercolor marker. It will just rub right off. So you do want to use an alcohol-based product. Now I'll just glue that little heart on there. Now I've cut 2 little strips here. These are maybe about 1/8 of an inch wide because I wanted to cover the sides of these. You certainly could skip this part, but I just cut 2 little strips of that same green paper we used before. I'll use my Ranger Multi-Medium matte glue again right along this tape. I'll put a nice bead of it there, and then I'm going to pop these little inserts right in there. And they'll fit in there perfectly. And again, that just finishes off that edge, just gives a nice look to it. So I'd let those dry. And now I'll give you a closer look at the ornament. You can see there at the top, I added some Nouveau drops to that wreath. Some crystal drops in the autumn red color. So let me give you a closer look at the finished ornament. And as I mentioned earlier, all the products I used today are linked down below and also on my blog. So if you enjoyed today's video, please hit the like button and subscribe. And don't forget to hit that notification bell so that you don't miss a single video. As always, thank you so much for joining me today. I really appreciate it. Have a great day. Take care. Bye-bye.